Welcome everyone to the Montessori Family Life webinars. This is our Tuesday fun time together. We have a wonderful presentation today for you and for if there are people that are not grandparents and there are people that are grandparents, we welcome all of you. We welcome anyone, anytime. We're glad you're here. If you are returning, thanks for coming back. And if you are new, we love having you here with us. Welcome again. And our topic today, or our title for our topic, is 2020 Virtual Grandparenting. And my guest and friend and colleague is Margot Garfield Anderson. She has worked at the Montessori Foundation for, I don't know, 20 plus years. 21 years. She's done membership, marketing, oh Lord, I don't know, probably every position that's possible, because we were very, very small when she started. And so there was almost no staff. And so everybody did everything. So she's done it all. Oh, our conferences, the big thing that she really does is our conferences. And luckily we've been able to work together to get somebody new to help out with conferences, but Margot has done it for since the inception of our conferences. So we're so glad to have Margot with us. So you can imagine, after all these many years, she is a grandma. And guess what? So am I. I am blessed and she is blessed. And so our program today is about how in the world do you grandparent when there are quarantines, when there is sheltering in place, when there are restrictions on travel. If you don't live near your grandchild, neither Margot nor I live near our grandchildren. Some of you, though, that live near your grandchildren still can't see them, can't go over there and talk to them or give them a hug. And how do you grandparent in a situation like that? Which brings me to, I just want to say to all of you that are here today, Margot and I know, and all of us at the Foundation and IMC know, this is a very difficult time. This is a time in our lives that's uncertain, that's kind of scary, that no one has ever experienced before. And I just want to say that to you and acknowledge that and take a deep breath and just know that we can, for a few minutes, relax and be together and know that we are together to help take care of each other. Margot, welcome. I'm so glad you're here with me today.
Thank you, Lorna. I'm happy to be here. The first thing I want to do is just, some of you may know that for the past 10 and change years, I've been writing a column in our magazine, Tomorrow's Child publication for parents that we do on being a Montessori grandparent. And Blakely Jane, my oldest granddaughter, the first one in the dark green dress, has been the subject of many of my writings. She's followed in this picture the little girl in pink who was doing all the athletic things. She's a competitive dancer, is her cousin Aubrey. And next to her is Blakely's sister Reagan. And the littlest one, my character, is Harper, and she's 4, and she is a character.
You can tell, Margot, just by her little face that she's got in that photo.
Yes, and that's pretty typical of her. But grandparenting during the pandemic has taken on a very different dimension for many of us, and that's that we've had to go to virtual ways to be connected with our grandchildren. And that means using devices such as FaceTime and Zoom. And FaceTime is what I personally used to create the little video that I did. It's really easy, and we'll get into a little bit of that later. But thankfully, each one of my grandchildren is a digital native, as we call them.
Yes.
and has helped me learn even more because they know more than I do. And they each have their own iPad, which is a Mac device. Some children have Androids. So, whatever device you and your grandchildren have, there are lots of different ways that you can actually do the technology part of all of this. So, this is how we got there. We got there at a necessity because right now, most of us are either keeping our distance from our grandchildren or we are physically separated and unable to travel until it becomes safe to do so. So, what does that mean? It does mean it's really okay to use the technology of the 21st century if we want to stay connected, because that is the vehicle we are using right now. And I'm sure, Lorna is in the same boat as many of you, even parents, right, Lorna?
I certainly am. I was thinking about it recently, and used to be, a phone call was really a terrific thing, and it still is a terrific thing, except that I've gotten so used to, because of work and other things, using the video connection that
Hmm.
I don't like phone calls anymore. I want to see that person. I want to see their face. I want to,
Right.
I want to interact with them in a very different way, and certainly our technology allows us to do that.
One of the very interesting things that happened, and as it evolved, and as a Montessorian, one of the things we are taught is to be very keen observers. So when this all started, my first reaction was to contact my two daughters and tell them, pack up the car, come down here, let's all shelter in place. It's only going to be for a couple of weeks. You were coming down here anyway. Let's all do it together. They respectfully declined, not knowing what laid ahead.
Yeah.
So the lesson, and every suggestion that I made in those first couple of weeks was met with my daughters respectfully declined, not knowing what laid ahead, and it became a reoccurring theme. And I just, I had to take that emotional response that I wanted to give to them out of the picture and take a step back and say, I am an observer. I cannot force it or I will push them away. And we don't know how long this is going to last. So we have to tread respectfully and very easily during this particular time, because emotions were really raw in those first couple of weeks. My children and their husbands were working at home, and Lorna, I'm sure you experienced similar. Although your son was a Montessori child, so maybe he reacted a little differently to you.
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, my family is sheltering at home up in Philadelphia, in the neighborhood that you saw on the video, um, and and my son is working at home. My daughter is an acupuncture doctor, so she is basically out of work, which in some ways was a good thing because, of course, Otis isn't going to school. And so when I started to talk about, well, what can we do besides, well, we were already doing Sunday FaceTime,
Hmm. Yeah.
because we're not together a lot of the time during the normal during normal days. Um, but I said, what can we do in addition, to our Sunday FaceTimes? And it was interesting because my family actually had a different response. Their response was, well, what do you want to do? We can do anything. We can do anything you want to do. And what I found observing, as Margot said, is that Otis, my little guy, my 3-year-old, um, was the one who was like, nope, not going to do it. you know. So it wasn't the parents that had a little bit of skepticism, let's say, about it. It was actually my grandson. And so I had to be a good observer and figure out how we could maybe introduce some things, but hoping that he would come around and enjoy it, because that's
Hmm.
the whole idea.
Hmm. So what I tried to do was gently and respectfully begin to suggest that maybe the girls each have their own designated times during the day when I could visit with them and engage them in some activity so that the parents could take a breather, get in some work time, and be like the virtual grandparent in the room because our girls are a little bit older than Otis. And so trying to keep them, in one place or where they weren't going to get into something they shouldn't be getting into was a little bit easier for me. But again, my daughters respectfully declined, not knowing what lay ahead.
That's right. And again, on the opposite side of the thing is we started to try some different things. I suggested, let's do yoga together, let's do story time together. And my 3-year-old, not respectfully, declined by not participating. And so again, we had to be patient and we had to observe and wait and wait. So here we go.
So once again, I put on my Montessori hat and tried to figure out how can I shift this a little bit so that we're all benefiting from these interactions that we could possibly have. And so I began to think like your grandchildren's Montessori teachers. I started to try to really entice them to be engaged in some of the things. So it didn't become about me necessarily. It became about what would excite them to do so that they could interact with me. And that's what the guides in the classrooms do. They try to make each presentation that they do so inviting to the children that they'll want to come to the circle and see the little presentation. Teachers don't stand up there and deliver across the classroom. They work in small little groups, and that's what I was trying to do that with as much enthusiasm and joy and excitement about anything that I could think of. Um, so I knew that they were not getting the online stuff that the teachers were trying to do because they hadn't quite figured it out yet. So I tried to kind of circle around that a little bit and bring my daughters into the kind of circle of wanting to do this. And again, my daughters respectfully declined, not knowing what laid ahead. And that
Oh,
seemed that was the recurring theme until
yeah,
it started to tip a little bit.
absolutely. And we did a similar kind of thing. I said, okay, well, um, Otis loves story time, but he wasn't really excited about doing it virtually. So I said, well, let's let him, you look at what's online so he can have the book and I can have the book, and let him pick from a couple that you've already looked at. Because I got to tell you, some of those online books are really terrible.
Hmm.
um, and so give him some input into this and him some choice about it.
Yeah.
And the same with the yoga. It's sort of like in school, as Margot said, in school, if we're doing a group time, a large group time, not everybody is always interested in what we as Montessori teachers think might be the most wonderful thing we could possibly do. And so what I used to do as a teacher is if there was a child that was antsy, not able to be, really engaged in what was going on in group time, I would say, that's okay. Why don't you just sit in a chair just outside the circle and the group, and you don't have to participate with us. You don't have to do anything. Just watch and listen, and when you're ready, you can join us again. And that's kind of what we've done with Otis, in terms of the yoga thing. He's still sitting on the side watching grandma, grandpa, mommy, and sometimes daddy doing yoga.
So what I decided was I remembered that when Blakely was really a little child, here in Florida, in the community that we live in, we have some returning sandhill crane pairs. And over the past 15 years, many of them and their future generations have had chicks. So I started sending daily videos of the newborn chicks in the neighborhood. And there were, as it turned out, 3 pairs this year. And Blakely was always, fascinated by them. She used to run back and forth with her little chubby hands pumping, yelling. She thought their names were McCranes. McCranes, McCranes, but she was really saying my cranes. So they've always been a fascination to the girls because when they're here in April is when the chicks are born. So we always see the babies. And I began every day with the little videos I was uploading to each of their iPads, asking them little questions. Do you see what they're eating? Do you see how big they are? Well, now the cranes are learning to fly. And now they like, Grammy, what did the cranes do today? So I had to find that one thing that was this connection that we all really enjoyed, and keep feeding them that information. And that's when I saw a real shift in their willingness to come to the iPad and talk to me on their own a little bit more. That was my gateway.
Yeah. And again, I'm going to bring it back to that Montessori classroom, Margot. Those teachers are really paying attention and looking for what the children are interested in and finding the joy. This
Mm-hmm.
is this is such a huge difference in a Montessori classroom than in a traditional school, is that we're looking for the joy, because when children are joyful and enjoying themselves and the people they're with, they're going to learn a lot more.
Mm-hmm. So that was the response I had to wait for. I had to let them come to me. And when that happened, it was so interesting, Lorna. One
Mm.
day, my 7-year-old, Reagan, Blakely's younger sister, called me and she said, Grammy, she said, would it be all right if I read out loud to you? Because I need to, and now we're several weeks into,
Right.
at home. I have to read out loud to somebody for 20 minutes every day, and I'm choosing you. Would that be all right? And it's like one of those, of course, mommy, I'd love that. So she began doing that. And then right afterwards, her older sister Blakely would call and say, Grammy, I wrote a paper, a research paper. I'm sending it to you. Would you please read it? And one by one, all 4 of them in the 2 households started to turn to me. I don't know whether it was like to fill a void or because they really were enjoying it. I'll take whatever it is because it became the highlight certainly of my day, but I was really engaging with them and they were really focusing on the conversations that we began to have.
Beautiful. Give it time.
Give it
Give it
time.
some interest. Give it some pause.
Hmm.
And
And that was the door that opened little by little.
beautiful.
So again, I would try to, because the focus of my writings for Tomorrow's Child are always try to create these connections and memories with your grandchildren. And Harper's still little, so she's not going to have long term memories of the day to day of all of this. but I really try to interact and make those times so important. So there are certain phrases that we say over and over and over again. One of them that all four of them have known since they could first talk is, "What does Grammy always say?" And all four of them chirp, "Safety first," because they know that's their first memory of me. But as the calls became more frequent, um, we're building this set of memories. And that's when I got the idea, let's chronicle this. And that's
Mm.
where the the FaceTime live photos came in. Um, for those of you that don't know this, some of your Apple products, I know one of mine is very old and I can't do it with it, but there's a round button when you touch your screen, a round button with a big white center comes on. And if you hit that, just like you're clicking on a camera, it takes what's known as this live picture, which is like this tiny little burst that gives you a couple of screens. And so it moves a little bit as you look at it. And so, what we on both ends, all four of us started to do was we were taking these like crazy pictures as they were, doing these antics and figuring other things out on the computer. And you may have seen in the slideshow, um, Aubrey with her tongue curled. We were doing fish faces at each other. And Harper and I were doing fish kisses with our lips all pursed. And they are able to create these animal heads with some meme thing. And Reagan, my 7-year-old, created avatars of me with the peace symbol and my blonde hair, and she with her long brown hair. And so she'd make up little stories, and so the times that we were spending got longer and longer and longer until one day Harper was on with me for, I timed it, 1 hour and 57 minutes of constant talking. And every time since then, she says to me, "Grammy, can we have another one of our long chats?" Which cracks me up, but I'll take it.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
So these are the new skills that we've learned, and really and truly, I've learned along with them. Um, so what I encourage you all to do is find those features on your devices. And when you're done with an Apple one, you can go into your pictures and there's just like a click, make slideshow, and it'll put all those live pictures into one slideshow. And there were a bunch of different music. When Lorna first showed me hers, I said, I love it. I love the way you opened yours up like a storybook, each photo unfolded to the next. The first thing I did was set the music to it. And I found that the music with the slideshow was even more impactful. So Lorna spent the weekend and she texted me over the weekend, I did it, I figured it out. And she was able to put the music to it as well.
Yes. And one of the things I'll tell you folks that helps is I'm finding that I didn't used to go to help on different programs and things
Right.
like that because I didn't think it would really help me, I guess, or I was too proud, I don't know what. But I am finding that help is a really good thing. And so when I was struggling with the music and trying to get my slideshow going and all of that, I went to help and it told me in very a simple way how to get the music to go on with the slides and how to make it into a movie because then we had to make it into a movie. Um, and so don't shy away from the help button on your computer because it really can be great. All right, let's see. Okay.
So as I said, sometimes the call lasts a long time, and that's okay as well. Sometimes I have to say, well, honey, I have a meeting and I have to go, but let's find another time to connect. And the funniest story was one day Blakely called and she said, Grammy, I'm going to get all four of us on with you. And the 4-year-old in the background was on a class call. And when she was done, you could hear her in the background yelling, I'm not looped into this conversation. I didn't get an invite to the Zoom. Loop me in, loop me in. And it struck me so funny that this is the vernacular. We always well, we aren't as Montessorians, but those of us who are outside of Montessori are always so amazed at the verbal skills of Montessori children. They use the correct words for objects instead of silly little names like kitty cat or something like that. They'll say, oh, this Persian cat or this cumulus cloud or whatever. So the reality is the language they're building right now, the vocabulary they're building is the technology that they're going to need when they get older. So again, it's okay. It's okay. Well, hopefully it's not going to last forever. And that's, we're all feeling that 2.5 months into it. But for now, I highly encourage you to try to connect with your grandchildren using even your teenage grandchildren, because Blakely's older and sometimes I can't hold her interest. And I never try to force it. It's really better to let them lead the conversation. And you can ask questions, but the longer you do this, the better off, even when all of this is over, your relationship with them is going to be, because, they'll have this new skill set to communicate with you. And hopefully they'll want to continue these kinds of, intensive conversations, even when they go back to school.
And so,
And so nothing will ever replace the hugs, the kisses, tucking them in for the night, or working in person on projects together. But we've made the best out of it. We'll continue to do that. And hopefully soon we'll all be reunited with them, and doing that incredible bonding that we as grandparents love to do with our grandchildren.
ooh, I hope so.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Margot, thank you so much for presenting and sharing your story. I love it that your girls are a little bit older than Otis, because it makes a real difference in the kinds of things that you can do. And I'm sure people got some good ideas from that. I've put on here a book that I absolutely love. It's called Camp Granny. It's 130 green projects that you can do with your grandchildren. Now, when somebody's little like Otis, it's really hard, or it's much more challenging, let me just say that, to do projects virtually. However, I think that if you get creative, you can probably do that. It probably takes a little bit of planning ahead of time with the family as well as with the child. But certainly when we get back to our hopefully way of being able to interact with each other in person, this is a great reference and tool for people that are just trying to think of something they can do with their grandchildren when they come for the weekend or for the day. And so that's why I put it on there. It's one of my favorite books. So thanks everybody for joining us today. Thank you, Margot, for sharing with us today. We'll see you again next week for another session. Bye for now.